whatever time zone you may be in. We're here live from Studio 10167 here in Jacksonville, Florida. And as Rabbi Feigenbaum said, this is our last installment of a very interesting series, having these very interesting conversations with people about their journey in life. One of the things that we mentioned in the past is the Baal Shem Tov writes, the first Hasidic rabbi. He wrote that everybody goes through their own journey in life. He calls it their 42 stops along the way, as the Jewish people stopped 42 different stops along the way from the time they left Egypt to the time they came to the Promised Land. And we go through our 42 stops along the way. I don't know if it means literally or figuratively. We go to preschool, then we go, I see Chana Bendinon, the preschool teacher, nice to see you. And then, all the way to River Garden. By the way, Mazel Tov, Kathy, on your retirement. It's good to see you. And but from cradle to grave, we go through our different stops along the way. And at each stop, we have an opportunity and a challenge. So we've been speaking to different people about their interesting journey and their stops along the way. And we're very honored to have Natallie Menaged here on with us today, formerly from Jacksonville, where her seeds were planted in her early years, but went on to make a great name for herself and the Jewish people and great impact in many different areas for Klal Yisrael. So she's living today in Ramat Beit Shemesh, I believe. So thank you, Natallie, for joining us. And we're honored and we appreciate your time. So as I think most of the folks on the Zoom here know, maybe some that will watch it later on don't yet know that you are originally from Jacksonville and Jacksonville, Florida. So you could just tell us a little bit about, I know your parents are here, but just a little bit about your upbringing, because we're not all familiar with the first part of your journey.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me and for conceiving of this project, Rabbi Fish. I think it's so nice, and especially even for those of you that live in the same community, it's so hard to be together nowadays. But for me personally, one of my biggest challenges during this time period has been to not be able to come visit my family in Jacksonville. So I really appreciate the chance to connect with my family and also with the greater community. And absence certainly makes the heart grow fonder. I'm originally from Jacksonville, lived there for the first 18 years of my life. And I would say in this period where we've all had extra time to reflect on who we are, how we got to be who we are, the things that we're most grateful for, and the principles that are the most dear to us. Certainly I've had a lot of time to reflect these last few months about how much I love the Jacksonville Jewish community and how formative it was in my experiences and how it continues to guide things that are important to me now. So I mean, you want me to talk more about my particular upbringing?
However much you want to share.
Okay.
Your parents
Right.
are here, so don't feel like you're put on the spot or anything.
So I'm originally from Jacksonville. My parents who are here, my mom is from New York originally, my father's from Israel, and they have a nice, beautiful, romantic, adventurous story. And they raised us in Mandarin in the amazing Jacksonville Jewish community. My parents are members of the Jacksonville Jewish Center and also associate members of Etz Chaim. But I grew up most of my life really involved with the Jacksonville Jewish Center. I had a big example from my parents, which I'm sure hopefully you'll give me time to talk about. Oh, hey, that's my family, my Israeli family coming on. That's my husband and my kids. Hi, guys. Hi, why aren't you guys in bed? Or at least in pajamas, at least act like you're going to go to bed soon. Anyways, yeah, so I was really involved. My family was really involved in the community and really in all facets of the community. But I'd say in like my earlier stage, the Jewish Center, the Jacksonville Jewish Center was like sort of like the center of things for me. I don't know, Rabbi Fish, tell me what direction to take it in.
Okay, so let's just pivot to your next phase. You graduated. Where did you go for high school in Jacksonville?
So I went to Stanton College Prep. Still around over there, Stanton? Yeah.
Stanton College Prep. It's still
I was in the IB program. I was also in Hebrew school.
So you Got it. So you went from you graduated from Stanton, and then my understanding is you went to Gainesville, to University of Florida. Is
Yeah,
that
I
correct?
actually my freshman year I went out of state. I went to Johns Hopkins University. I was like looking for adventure, but then I think I realized that being closer to home was better for me, and I after a year I came back and I was at University of Florida.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about for anyone's college experience. They have different hobbies or different things that they focus on during those formative years. But it's our understanding that you were involved in starting the group Gators for Israel, Israel Advocacy Program on campus. Can you just tell us a little bit about, what was your motivation for that? What did that entail, and how did that go?
Sure. I'll actually say it really starts back with like my family values and the things that were important to my parents in terms of Jewish education and Jewish identity. So first of all, my father's from Israel, really grew up most of his life outside of Israel. But it was a really important value in my family to be educated about Israeli history and even politics, if which is something I was always interested in, and also a strong Jewish identity. And I think like something that's really stuck with me even when I got into situations as I did when I got into university, where I didn't necessarily have all the facts or the confidence to advocate for Israel when there was there were some opponents, but I had a very strong identity and I had a clarity that I was part of a nation that had a connection to a land that was thousands of years old. And because I had that strong Jewish identity and a strong, I guess, tribal affiliation, when I was encountered with anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment, I knew that I wanted to get more active and get involved and make a difference. So that was something that I had from growing up. And I would also say something that I had from growing up in my earlier days in Jacksonville was a really strong desire to be active in youth movements and be a leader and sort of make a difference and connect with other people, other Jewish people my age, which was something that I was always trying to do through going to camp and being involved with USY. And I think when I got to university, I was also looking to even have like a slightly larger network for my Jewish identity. So it happened to be that I was involved in campus politics at UF, a little bit separate from Israel specifically. It was also like an involvement or a hobby of mine. And one day, this was in 2000, I got up one day and I went to school in Gainesville, and there was a display put up by people I had never seen before. And I'd never seen anything like this in my life. There was barbed wire, kind of like in a square, and pictures of Israeli soldiers and Palestinian children taped up. And the people that were running this display had Sharpie markers, and they were writing numbers on people's arms. And somebody would walk by, I walked by, they said to me, "Can I write a number on your arm?" And I said, like, "Why do you want to write a number on my arm?" And they said to me, "Well, in the West Bank, Israeli soldiers are tattooing numbers on the arms of Palestinian children because this is the second Holocaust." And this was really shocking. It was obviously shocking to me. And the hardest part was that I understood that this was a completely false allegation, inflammatory. It was really anti-Semitic allegation. But I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to do about it. And I still to this day, I'm not exactly sure how to react if I was back in that situation, but I knew that I didn't want to get in that kind of situation again and not have a strategy. And also another important thing I got from growing up in Jacksonville was a love for football. And I know that the best defense is a good offense. So I really like took it upon myself to get educated and have a strategy when it came to Jewish leadership and Israeli identity on campus, so that we as a Jewish community on campus would not get stuck. And this went on for several months. This was at the height of the second Intifada in Israel. And there was suicide bombings, terror attacks going on all the time in Israel. And all of a sudden there was an explosion of anti-Israel sentiment across, not just University of Florida wasn't even a bad case, across North America, in Montreal and in Berkeley and in New York City. And so this went on actually University of Florida, believe it or not, for a long time. And that was the impetus for building up Gators for Israel, which was the Israel club that we started. But we were also part of a larger network of advocacy clubs that now still, I think 20 years later, still exists in campuses across North America.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Not that you experienced that, but wonderful that you were able to channel your reaction into something concrete and tangible. Because I think sometimes when we're confronted with a situation, a very upsetting situation, we're not exactly sure how to bottle that emotion and channel that in a productive way. So I think it's really remarkable that you were able to to rally into that into a positive way. So just tell us a little bit about it. How did your group counter those those inflammatory messages on campus?
Well, the first thing that happened was like very shortly thereafter, I got invited to go to Israel on an advocacy training trip. Somebody reached out to me, and this trip was run by Aisha Torah, and it's a organization now called Hasbara Fellowships, and at the time we were the first group that came, and we came to Israel in December of 2000 to 2001, that winter break, and Israel was deserted. All of Ben Yehuda Street was closed down. There were no birthright trips. There were no tourists coming in. And we learned so much from touring and understanding the facts on the ground, seeing the demographic situation, seeing the security situation, and understanding all of the information firsthand. And I really honestly felt that I had now information that nobody else had, and a narrative that nobody else really had access to. And that if I didn't go back and tell the story, there wasn't necessarily anybody else that was going to. And I think it's really important that we take the things that we know personally from experience and communicate them to people that might not have the exposure or the experience that we have. Like, that's something that's really stuck with me forever. That it's not necessarily about being the smartest person or being the most confident person, but it's about being able to take lessons from what you're experiencing and figure out how that they're going to resonate with others. We worked really hard. We focused on a couple of different important points. One was to make sure that there was a strong representation of Jewish students in student government, and also look for natural allies, not necessarily Jewish students, but leaders of other multicultural groups on campus, or other religious groups on campus that we could approach proactively before they got approached with some sort of anti-Israel propaganda, and just explain to them a little bit about the situation in Israel, explain to them points of commonality that we might have, like shared history or experiences, and just build those relationships so that when negative things started coming up, we already had those relationships with them, and we had like discussed points of commonality. We looked for ways to support them and some of the challenges that they were facing. And so we really worked hard to build those relationships. We also reached out to, we had a problem right then also because the University of Florida suspended study abroad to Israel because the State Department had issued some warnings. And so UF said that if a student wanted to go study in Israel, they had to withdraw from University of Florida and then go to Israel and then reapply. And they wouldn't even guarantee that they would get back into UF. And there were other countries in the Middle East where the situation was volatile, including Egypt, where they didn't enact that policy. So we collected 6,000 signatures of University of Florida students who we convinced of our situation, and we went to Tallahassee and we went to the state legislature, and we lobbied for a resolution to reinstate study abroad. And it took about 2 or 3 years, but we got study abroad reinstated to Israel. And
Mazel tov.
yeah, this was a while ago.
That's a major achievement. Your parents are on the line. I'm just getting nachas just listening to this. I can't imagine what your parents are feeling. But let me just ask you this: taking a position for Israel on campus is not necessarily the most popular thing all the time. My question to you is: did you feel any resistance, either from professors, other students, especially as like groups like the SJP, Students for Justice for Palestine, are very strong on campus? Did you ever feel personally targeted in any way or uncomfortable in any way because of this?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I met my husband in a political science class at University of Florida. I don't know if he's still here, but we both had actually, the way we got to know each other was that in that class, we both were very concerned that our identities were negatively affecting our grades. Me as a political supporter of Israel, and he because he was a little bit more of a slightly more religious background at the time. And and we did run into some obstacles in that class of not necessarily feeling like we could express ourselves. I wouldn't say it was so bad. I was targeted a little bit personally because I was so vocal and I was like on the front page of the paper as like the Jewish girl. But I'll tell you this, I started at that time, Aisha Torah gave some seed money, and a few of us started traveling around together as when we were still students to different universities across America. And there were places where the situation was so much more difficult for Jewish students. I remember going to University of Michigan to help them. There was an SJP conference. It was the first Students for Justice in Palestine conference. And we just went and we protested peacefully outside with poster boards, and we got spat on and we got called horrible names. And I remember thinking, the truth is, like, University of Florida, relatively speaking, is a very welcoming place for pro-Israel students, and as it was a very comfortable place to be Jewish. So the truth is, going to places like Michigan, I experienced this also at Rutgers, and my friends and in Toronto, I experienced it really badly, and my friends in Montreal and San Francisco had it really bad. So I think actually, like, the momentum that I felt that we could actually make such a positive impact in Gainesville because there was actually so many supporters of Israel and Jewish students who wanted to be educated and activated, really helped me feel like we had to be a model or be a powerhouse and kind of try to build like a prototype for the other groups that were forming at the time. It was intimidating in some of the day-to-day moments, but it was also like, it was really inspiring to feel like you were part of a bigger movement, especially because, like, for those of us that care about Israel, I think in America, when something bad is happening in Israel, you kind of feel so helpless about it. But it was really empowering to feel like what we were doing was making a difference for people in Israel. And I still think about that now that I live in Israel, like how much it's important for us that the Jews on the other side of the pond give their support.
Well, it's really amazing work that you did. I was, a while back, I was reading about all the aggressive tactics of SJP, Students for Justice for Palestine.
Yeah, they would sit outside my house in a car. I mean, it was not.
One university, they actually went so far to lobby the university cafeteria to remove the sabra hummus from the cafeteria because that was associated with the occupation. Never mind you that it was produced in Brooklyn, New York, or Queens, but just the fact that it was named Sabra with an Israeli part owner, I mean, extremely aggressive. But I just want to kind of, I guess, kind of pivot to something else, because this movement, I can say, that you became involved with, sounds to me not just like a job or a career, but as a calling. Tal Ben Shachar, he writes in one of his happiness books that there's some people are just stuck in a job, Monday to Friday. Friday's their favorite day, and then they're always looking for the next vacation. And then there's the career people that are always looking to advance themselves to the next portfolio. And then there's the people that are most blessed and fortunate, are blessed to have a calling in life. And that, to me, it sounds like this kind of became your calling. No, we're not kind of. This became your calling in terms of asserting yourself for your people and for your homeland. And this calling went on to, even after you made Aliyah, you were still involved with Israel advocacy. But my question is, at what point did this kind of switch in your head and say, I'm no longer just going to be an advocate for Israel. I'm not just going to be a cheerleader for Israel here in the U.S., but I'm actually going to move to Israel because of your belief that's where the Jewish people need to be. At what point was it? Before you met Eli? After you got married? By the way, Eli, hello. Eli is one of my favorite people. It's great. It's great to see even a brief glimpse of him on. One of the casualties of COVID is we didn't get to see each other this past summer. But at what point did you?
Bezrat Hashem.
Yeah, the Sephardic Minion still have a place for you, Eli. Here, but anyway, so at what point did Aliyah become a thing that you wanted to act on?
Okay, so I would love to answer that, but I have to back up to something so important you said, Rabbi Fish, which is like to feel like something is more than just what you do, but it's like a calling, and to be fortunate to have a career that is not just a day job, but something really meaningful. So I have to be honest, I really learned that by example in my home and my family growing up. I'm sure some people here know my mother, and frankly, also that my father is a hidden tzaddik and does a lot of extra things for the community that I also don't. Whatever, I'm not going to embarrass him. But my mother and my family really like believe strong. It's not even a belief, like it's a way of life, like you said, of like doing things to strengthen community and just sort of giving your all in whatever you're doing. And I think like I don't know. I guess there were times in my life I considered being a lawyer or being something else, but really everything I ever thought of doing like was, how can I have purpose and meaning? So I think that came a lot from my family. And even if I hope my aunt and uncle still on here, also from my aunt and uncle. And I don't know how many of you know, like my uncle like has poured his heart in his later years into Holocaust memorialism, and my aunt and uncle were huge examples for me growing up on like taking care of my grandmother and like the sanctity of life and just imbuing everything you do with meaning. So sorry if that's like a digression, but I couldn't let it go unsaid when you said, about like doing something that you find meaningful. That's a huge quality that just was built into me in my education and my upbringing. So I don't even remember your question, but I needed to say that.
That's a huge blessing to embrace, your calling in life and be fortunate that you're able to spend so much time on it. And I share your admiration for your parents and for your aunt and uncle and all their contributions. Obviously, I can't share in the same way, but I can only imagine how positive such role models were in terms of shaping your path forward. But
so I just wanted about my transition, right?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, a second thing started to happen to me when I was at University of Florida, which was like a change in my religious identity. And I think I had often separated my feelings about Israel and politics from like my Judaism, not intentionally. They just seemed kind of like two different things that were near each other, but not necessarily all one picture. And I had gone on this trip with Aisha Torah where I learned advocacy, but I was also sort of exposed to more traditional versions of Shabbat and things that I had kind of never had a chance to ask questions about. And I got that opportunity to ask questions. It didn't necessarily change things overnight, but it sort of planted seeds. And then actually the Chabad rabbi in Gainesville, I don't know if anybody here knows Rabbi Beryl and Chani Goldman, but they also they always used to tell me what a Jewish leader I was. And I would say like, no, I'm a pro-Israel leader. And they're like, no, you're a Jewish leader. And they would sort of like introduce me and sort of like paint me in that light. And I think it was something sort of at a certain point clicked inside of me that I wasn't quite sure like what a Jewish leader was or what that meant to me. And it kind of also opened up for me like a path of religious questions and self-discovery. And those things kind of like happened together towards the end of my time in Gainesville. And my husband and I met, we were dating, and then he's a little younger than me. So I had to kind of wait for him to finish college. Though he did it pretty quickly. I thought it was gonna take another 2 years and he did it, he finished a year early. But during that time, I was offered a chance to do Israel advocacy professionally. And so I was based in New York for a year and I was traveling back and forth between Israel and America a lot. And yeah, I mean, at the time, I don't know that I ever thought I would make Aliyah for good. But when Eli and I got engaged, we agreed we got married in December. We said we were going to go for 6 months to Israel before we started law school together. So we got married, we got on the plane before the week was over. We actually had a nice Sheva Brachot in Jacksonville, but then we got on the plane and we came for 6 months and it wound up being 2 years. This happens to people a lot when they come to Israel. Did this happen to you, Rabbi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we ended up staying there for 4 years.
Yeah, right. Extend your ticket itis. It was, I wish we get back to that being our biggest global pandemic. But yeah, we wound up here for 2 years and we realized that we wanted to be more involved with like maybe that there was a lot of Jewish lawyers, but there weren't as many like people like us that wanted to, change the world. And like, so we got him, my husband studied and became a rabbi. And we we decided to go back to America after 2 years because we weren't really sure what the long-term plan was. And I continued doing Israel advocacy professionally, working for Hasbara fellowships. And we lived in Brooklyn. And then about 5 years into our time in Brooklyn, we sort of were at a crossroads. And we got offered the opportunity to make Aliyah to Bar Ilan University, where we work now. And I guess that was the original question. But I think we felt our oldest was 4, and we had a 2-year-old also, and we sort of said that we wanted to, if we were going to come to Israel, we were going to do it when our kids were young enough or not yet born that they would have an easy transition. And so now that seemed like the time to try it. That was in 2011. And we actually got gifted an amazing Sefer Torah. Is it in this room, Eli? No, it's in the Beit Midrash next door. But we got gifted an amazing Sefer Torah from the Etz Chaim community that we brought with us on the plane. And that was it. If we weren't sure we were going to go, now that we were taking a Sefer Torah to Eretz Yisrael, we for sure, it rode in first class on the Nefesh B'Nefesh flight. I think there was a member of Knesset and a Torah in first class. We were in coach. And we touched down on the ground together, dancing with that Torah. We were on the news. And that was 2011, and we've been here since.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite internet clips ever is watching Eli getting off the plane in the Ben Gurion airport with the Torah. And it's really was such a powerful, it's one of my favorite things just to watch is just the Nefesh B'Nefesh, the way they greet people when they make Aliyah. I mean, what other country, greets immigrants that way? Normally, who wants immigrants? At best, we'll tolerate them. Here you had a few weeks ago, I was watching just a clip of the Prime Minister of Israel, along with some senior cabinet members, welcoming Ethiopian immigrants, Ethiopian Jewish immigrants with open arms. It's just so refreshing and compelling. Especially, we just finished this past Shabbat, the Parsha of Vayechi, where we learned about even Yosef, before he died, even though he was entrenched in Egyptian life, entrenched in Egyptian culture, he said, I'm going to die, but don't forget about our homeland. So I love watching those clips and seeing Eli getting off the plane with that Torah. I'm glad we were able to have some part of that. But tell us a little bit about once you got to Israel. My understanding is you continued on with Israel advocacy and Eshet Torah. Is that correct?
For the first 2 years that we lived here in the dorms at Bar Ilan, I still did the Israel advocacy. But at a certain point, thank God, I had 2 more kids in 3 years, and it just seemed like it might be time to take a step back. And I'm still in close connection with the people that are continuing on with that advocacy, but it felt like time to open up a little bit of a new chapter in life. And my husband had been working very hard, and his personal learning and his personal growth was also getting to the point where he was going to have a bigger position here at Bar Ilan. And it's nice. We've been a team since 2001. When did we meet, Eli? 2002. And it's nice. I mean, please, Hashem, we'll have a long life together, but it's also nice to ride the waves together, And so now he's the director of the program and I'm the assistant director of the program we run here. And that was a nice transition for me also to balance my growing family better, but still be able to do work that was really meaningful and my work be connected to my home a little more. And so we were really lucky.
So were there any challenges when in terms of your transition after you made Aliyah? Was it smooth sailing, or and for any of us that are contemplating Aliyah, if you can just give us a little little pointers or something to either keep in mind or other things that would be helpful to know.
Well, my biggest regret is that my Hebrew is not at the level that it should be. So I really, really recommend anybody that's going to do it, set yourself up to do an immersive Ulpan or an immersive situation where your Hebrew can get really good. I mean, it's better than it used to be, but I would like it to be stronger. So I think that's been a challenge. The other thing to understand is that Israel is your big, loud crazy Jewish family that you get all together once a year when it's not Corona times, like at Rosh Hashanah or whatever. So Israel's like that times like 8 million. Uh, everybody's a family. So like it's loud and noisy, and sometimes it's hard to get through the bureaucracy, but you just kind of got to be up for the challenges and know that the flip side of it is like, if your tire breaks on the side of the road, 100 people will stop to help you fix it. They might have everybody have their own opinion of exactly how you should fix it, but like they will all be there to help you. So you just kind of like, it's a bit of a cultural transition in that sense. And yeah, it's, you know, people worry, I think, about like the financial challenge but nowadays, like the world is getting smaller in that regard. It's so easy to do jobs over the internet, or like, you know, startups and things like that. So those are some of the things to look out for. But I think if you have the right attitude and a little bit of luck, that's the place to be.
Which community do you live in? Is it Ramat Beit Shemesh that you live in, or?
So yeah, so when we first came, we actually lived in the dorms with the students for the first few years, which was like, I guess that's how my husband bribed me to live here for a few years by buying us a house that was not yet built in Ramat Beit Shemesh. And then now we live in Ramat Beit Shemesh for the last 6 years, but actually since September, we've been living mostly back in the dorms because of the whole Corona situation, and like wanting to be really, really close to our students and sort of be like a capsule together. So yes, in real life, we now live in Ramat Beit Shemesh, but at the moment we live here in Bar Ilan. I'll tell you about Ramat Beit Shemesh.
Just a little bit, just for just to give us a little taste.
Sure. So Beit Shemesh is about half an hour outside of Jerusalem. It's also like 45 minutes the other direction from Tel Aviv. So it's really centrally located. It was a small town for many years, and about 20 years ago, they expanded the town, and they built the area that they built attracted a lot of English speakers and a lot of other immigrants from France and Great Britain and South Africa. Like it became like a community of a lot of immigrants. Also a lot of Ethiopians there too. And it's really like, it's the fastest growing city in Israel. And over the last 20 years, it's like tripled in size. And even in the 6 years we've been there, it's doubled in size, which is incredible. It's very, very friendly for immigrants. It's beautiful. It's like located in the Judean mountains. So it's not quite the mountains. They're like hills. Jacksonville people would call it mountains, but now I know that it's just hills. But it's really beautiful. My mother calls it the city of children. We say that the average age at least in our neighborhood is 10, because everybody's like 20 with a baby. But it's really like the average age is so young, and there's just tons of children everywhere. One thing we really love is like on Shabbat, there's like just sort of not a car in sight, and the kids just kind of take over the streets. And it just sort of feels like, my mom says it reminds her when she comes of like Brooklyn growing up in the 50s or the 60s, because like the kids just walk to school and they walk to the grocery store and get you things, and they all kind of play together. And I think it's a really wholesome place to raise children, and there's just like a lot of different educational opportunities, a ton of different shuls, and it's just a fun place to be. We love it.
Well, let me just pivot to a different aspect that's on everyone's minds, and that is COVID. So COVID obviously has upended, you know, every different paradigm in the world, and including life in Israel has been you know, upended. So much so, think about what has been upended. The New York Times actually wrote a positive article about Israel the other day, in which they were touting the vaccine rollout, how successful Israel has been with their vaccine rollout compared to most other countries, including the United States, you know, lagging behind. So obviously, you know, Israel's been quite successful in that. But I just want to just get a sense for you, first of all, what life has been with COVID in Israel. How's that affected day-to-day life? And also talk a little bit about the vaccine rollout and how you know, how you see the path forward. Especially Israel seems to be a couple miles ahead of the rest of us.
Yeah, so I'll talk about it from two perspectives. One of like sort of how it's been in general, and another one how it's affected our students, because we have American students that come for the year to study here. So I also think that it's kind of been interesting to watch how that's gone. like I would say like this, Israelis are pretty experienced and prepared to fight wars. So when the first round, like the first kind of lockdowns hit, Israel was really, really strict. And when it's time to kind of lock down completely, we're really good at like following those emergency orders. I think probably a little more than Americans who don't like necessarily take lockdowns like that. We take it to a real level of intensity. Um, the flip side is like I said, we're all one big noisy crowded family. So when we open back up, like everybody's like kind of right back on top of each other again. So unfortunately, like we've had some big waves here. Um, thank God from the level of medical care and also the young age of the population, we have not suffered as much in terms of casualties, but our life has been a little bit more of like extreme ping pong, like either school's completely closed down or it's open and like my daughter has 45 kids in her class. So it kind of goes a little bit extreme like that. That's the reality. Um, the other sort of thing that's been for us when everything started back in the spring, we have about 120 students that come from America for the year to study at Bar Ilan, and we run a program where they take they take Jewish studies classes in the morning, secular academics in the afternoon, and then we do all sorts of like Shabbatons and trips and leadership activities with them in all of their other time. So a lot of them had to go, their parents brought them home back around like after Purim, I guess, back in March. But we actually had a group that stayed through, about 40 students that stayed through all of last year. And thank God remained healthy. And then we sort of spent all summer not knowing if American students were going to be allowed in for this year. And we worked together with all of, Shirley was just mentioning her granddaughter is here at Hebrew U. We worked together with all the other universities and also with the yeshivas and seminaries to work together to make sure that the foreign students can come here and have that experience, because this year between, and particularly the year between high school and university studies, is a really formative year in terms of Jewish identity and connection to Israel. So we all worked really hard to get the students here. But we've also like had to entertain them in new ways where they haven't necessarily been able to do some of the things they've done in the past. Thank God, like our students have still been able to go on a 10-day birthright trip, and they're doing a lot of volunteering, and they've all remained healthy. But it's been a bit of a challenge like that. So those have been some of the challenges, and obviously not being able to travel and visit. But yeah, on the other hand, sorry?
No, I said, I definitely understand what you're saying. I personally have a daughter in seminary this year, Tammy, my second daughter.
She's in her Shana Bet, or she's?
No, my older daughter was Shana Aleph last year. She's back here.
Right.
But Tammy's in the Neve campus in Benos Abigail. Beautiful. And, she's going from bidud to bidud, quarantine to quarantine. And it's been an unusual, a year in that regard. You're happy. But let me just ask you a different question. I know this is not your profession, but just to give us a taste, because one of the challenges that the United States was facing was, for sure early on with the corona, was a big strain on the medical infrastructure here. The hospitals, there was shortages of critical equipment in many states, ventilators, and so on and so forth. Israel is a totally different run medical system, where it's not private insurances, it's government run. Kupot Cholim, HMOs, but government run. Can you tell us a little bit about how they, just from your perspective at least, how the Israeli medical infrastructure managed the crisis, and were there, was there great distress on the population, or?
Yeah, I guess without being political, it is what it is, but Israel has nationalized healthcare. But it's not just one nationalized body the way it is in England. We have 4 main insurance carriers here, and you can choose your carrier. You could switch every 3 months if you are unhappy. So it creates some like natural competition between the different carriers. The benefits are mostly the same, but like the way that they allocate the resources is more competitive. So yeah, listen, I mean, again, not to be too political, there's been some shortcomings of it. It's been criticized over the years, but the truth is, in this situation, it's worked really well. Like I think there seems to have been a big wisdom in like having kind of a database where everybody's information is known. It's now with the vaccine rollout, definitely helped to make it happen really quickly. Believe it or not, I've already received my first round of the vaccine, I think 12 days ago, and I'm scheduled for in 8 days, my next round, which is shocking. And in some ways and it's been very hard for me to think that I have family members that are more at risk and older that have not been able to receive it. But I am proud that Israel's made it a priority. They're vaccinating 24 hours a day, 6 days and sometimes 7 days a week, as many people as they possibly can. And because we work in education, myself and my husband, we were candidates from our particular carrier. Not all the carriers are giving it to teachers, but our particular carrier is. Some of the other ones are prioritizing by age still, but Israel now has something like 12 or 13% of the population has received their first round of the vaccine, and we need it. Our numbers are going up here very quickly because of that family atmosphere and maybe because of a mutation, we're not really sure. But yeah, like it's bittersweet to talk about it to you, honestly, but I am really, I'm really grateful and humbled.
There's an interesting story. Again, I just read this in one of the Israeli media outlets. I can't confirm how if it's 100% true or not. But the story was that Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, got on the phone with the Pfizer CEO, who's not only Jewish, but he has Greek descent. His family's originally from Greece. And the objective of the prime minister was Israel should skip a couple of spaces in the line to get a lot of doses of the vaccine. So Bibi was schmoozing him up with Jewish geography of Greek Jews, and and by the end of the conversation, they had such a good conversation. Israel was at the front of the line in terms of but besides that, I think they've done a pretty good job in terms of rolling it out and making it available to the population.
Rabbi, I do have a little bit of inside information about that story.
Oh, go ahead.
Though I know we're recorded here, and now I'm a little scared because I heard that this is making the rounds with the conspiracy theorists too. But let's have some Jewish pride for a minute. So I think my sister is still on. My sister Jessica, she's over there. So my sister Jessica Hasid lives in Houston, and she is married to a wonderful Greek Jewish doctor who's from Salonika. He's from the same community that Albert Bourlas from Pfizer's family's from. I think his parents are even friends with the Bourlas family. And listen, I was as scared over here as anybody else. And my brother-in-law was one of the first people I turned to because he's a doctor. And when Pfizer started to have this good data, he said to me, Natalie, I know the Bourlas family. I know how much, his grandparents were survivors of Auschwitz. And I guarantee you that if he has the ability, he will make this vaccine available to Israel. But just so you know, it's not so simple as that. Israel and Greece have also forged a strategic defense partnership over the last few years. That's also been really important here in the Mediterranean basin. But I also, putting aside conspiracy theories, because Israel has this nationalized system and is a small country with strong medical care, we're also serving as a data set right now for the vaccine. Meaning we're the first place that can administer it fast enough for them to actually see how well it's going to work on the whole population and at what point herd immunity could be achieved. So I think that that's part of why companies are prioritizing to get the vaccine delivered over here, because they can actually study our data compared to some of the bigger countries that don't have a centralized system.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So your anecdote,
sorry if I thought that was
no.
There's a grain of truth to it. That's the truth.
Supports what I heard, but interesting. So hopefully Israel will achieve that herd immunity soon with with the vaccine rollout. And it's great to hear how successful that's going. God willing, everything should be. So one thing we spoke about without digging too deep into, you mentioned it just in passing a few times, was the Bar Ilan program that you and Eli run. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Is it a typical university program, gap year? Does it have I understand it has a little bit of an outreach aspect to it. Just a little sense about that program.
Sure. So we're a program for a student that wants a year after Israel that they won't just consider a gap year, but that will actually be for them a growth year, is what we call it. Um, for the kind of student that's looking for a balance of university learning, Jewish growth, and connecting to the land of Israel by touring and having leadership opportunities, we're a good match. We attract a diverse group of students from mostly from North America, but also some from South America and from Europe. And most of them this is their first time they're out of the house, and wherever they're going after, they're going to be completely on their own. So we sort of serve as that bridge where they have a lot more independence than they've had before, but they still have role models and supervision and a chance to kind of, I don't know, truthfully sometimes make mistakes and learn how to recover from them. And like they're at a really cool age, because the truth is, as all of us get older, it gets harder and harder to make big changes in your life. You get really set in your ways. So they're kind of at that age where they're wide open, trying to figure out who they want to be and what they want to do. And so it's really fun to work with them. Especially like there's certain areas that I've grown and I've solidified things I believe in. And sometimes when you have an idea of what you believe in, like you forget to remind yourself why you believe in it. So they're also like always challenging us and keeps you on your toes, but it also helps you be strong in what you believe in. And like, it's really fun and meaningful.
Now, is it part of the university itself, Bar-Ilan University itself? Is it a...
Yeah. Any student that wants to come for their gap year to Bar-Ilan comes through us. So they apply to us and we work together with the university, but we run the program, and we sort of like pay a fee to the university actually for them to get their college credits. And then we facilitate. We have a private dorm site that's about a 10-minute drive away from the university. And we have full-time staff that lives here in the dorms with them. And this is the way that you come for the year if you want to study at Bar-Ilan.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
We're kind of running out of time. I got strict instructions from my producer, Rabbi Feigenbaum, about the interview time. But one thing that over the years of my schmoozing with Eli, learning other different tidbits. It's such a bracha, I would say. It's just a blessing that you and Eli are able to not only live in the land, of our homeland, of our ancestral homeland, but living the dream, able to influence other young Jews in their formative years, and able to inspire them, and able to give them direction. And hats off to you both. And here in Jacksonville, they say Yasher Koach to everything. So, or Eli would say Chazak Baruch, but anyways, it's just been really inspirational just listening to your whole journey. I'm sure there's a lot more, but at this point, I just want to open it up if anybody has any other questions, comments, feedback before we kind of wrap things up.
So just for information, I'm gonna stop the recording because the official thing is over. So if anybody has questions or comments, please go ahead. I unmuted anybody that I actually muted, but go ahead. Any questions or comments?